Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Ready for another deep dive?
You know it. And this one is a big one. November 22nd, 1963. A day that started like any other, but ended with a moment that shocked the world. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been so many years and we're still talking about it.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's like this event is kind of woven into the fabric of America, you know? So picture it. A sunny day in Dallas. President Kennedy and Jackie are riding in an open-top limo.
Waving to the crowds, soaking up the Texas sunshine.
They were there to smooth over some issues in the Texas Democratic Party, and maybe unofficially kick off his re-election campaign.
And the motorcade route was published in advance. Can you imagine that today?
No way. But back then it was a different time. Anyway, they're driving through Dealey Plaza and everything seems fine, but then bam, shots ring out.
Total chaos. People screaming, diving for cover. Nobody knew where the shots were coming from, how many there even were.
It must have been terrifying. And in the middle of all this confusion, one name emerges. Lee Harvey Oswald.
The accused assassin. A former Marine, but that's barely scratching the surface.
Right. This guy had a past. Defected to the Soviet Union.
Married a Russian woman.
Then comes back to the U.S. But it's like he was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs the whole time.
Distributing pro-Castro leaflets, getting arrested for a fight with some anti-Castro exiles.
Even visited the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City just weeks before the assassination.
Yeah, and you gotta remember, this is the Cold War. Tensions are high, and this guy is practically putting himself on the FBI's radar.
It's almost like he wanted the attention. And then, get this, he gets a job at the Texas School Book Depository.
Which just happened to have a perfect view of the motorcade route. And on the day of the assassination, he shows up with a package. Tells everyone it's curtain rods.
No, it was a disassembled rifle. The rifle, according to the Warren Commission, that was used to kill Kennedy.
Chillin', right.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Warren Commission, they came up with this theory, the single bullet theory, that has caused so much debate.
One bullet causing Kennedy's wound and Governor Connolly's injuries.
It does seem pretty far-fetched.
Right. But they did a reenactment, and they showed it was possible, the trajectory of the bullet, I mean.
That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. You have this official explanation that seems a little unbelievable.
But then there's evidence to back it up.
It's a puzzle. And if you're as hooked on this mystery as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the rest of our deep dive.
There's so much more to uncover. Like the single bullet theory, it gets even more controversial when you consider that the bullet was found almost completely intact.
I know. Like, how can a bullet cause all that damage and look practically brand new?
Exactly. That's why they called it the magic bullet, right?
And to make things even more complicated, a Secret Service agent claimed to have found that bullet on Kennedy's stretcher.
So now you've got people questioning whether the agent was mistaken. Maybe the bullet was planted.
We'll probably never know for sure. But let's move on to what happened right after the shooting. Oswald managed to slip away from the book depository.
But then he runs into a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit.
And this is where things get really disturbing. Oswald shoots and kills Officer Tippit. But get this. Witnesses said he seemed totally calm after.
It's bizarre, right? You just killed a man and you're just chilling.
Exactly. Was it cold-bloodedness? Shock? Or was he, like he later claimed, a patsy?
That patsy claim has fueled a lot of conspiracy theories.
It's understandable, right? I mean, picture it. 1963, no 24/7 news cycle, limited information. People are scared, confused, rumors are flying.
It's a breeding ground for alternative explanations.
Well, absolutely. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive into the JFK assassination.
The assassination, it wasn't just a Dallas sting. The whole country felt it. The whole world, I mean.
It's true. Imagine turning on the TV and hearing that the president had been shot. Like, in the middle of the day, just gone.
Yeah, it was like this loss of innocence, Suddenly the world felt a lot more dangerous.
And in all that chaos, you have Lyndon B. Johnson, the vice president.
Suddenly, he's the president. Talk about pressure.
It's hard to even fathom.
It's interesting, though, Johnson, he refused to leave Dallas until Kennedy's body was with him.
Really?
Yeah. He wouldn't leave without Jackie, and Jackie wouldn't leave without her husband's body.
Wow.
I think it just shows you the weight of that moment.
Yeah, the gravity of the situation. And then just hours later, Johnson is sworn in on Air Force One.
It's surreal, right? Like something out of a movie. Death, power, a nation in mourning, all happening at once.
So you've got the new president, but the mystery of the assassination, that's still unfolding. And the next step, of course, is the autopsy.
Right. Bethesda Naval Hospital, that's where they took Kennedy. Jackie chose it.
Fitting, given his Navy service.
Absolutely. But the autopsy, well, let's just say it became a source of controversy.
How so?
Well, there was a lot of pressure to get answers, and quickly, the nation was in shock. But that urgency, combined with the emotional state of everyone involved, might have meant that the autopsy wasn't as thorough as it could have been.
I see.
And then there's the mystery of the missing brain.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Years later, it came out that Kennedy's brain, which was removed during the autopsy, it vanished. Nobody knows what happened to it.
That's creepy.
Right. This key piece of evidence just disappears. It adds fuel to the conspiracy theories, that's for sure.
No kidding.
And then, to make things even more confusing, just 2 days after the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald is shot and killed.
Jack Ruby. Talk about a moment that shocked the world live on TV. Oswald's being transferred between jails, surrounded by police, and then boom. Jack Ruby, this Dallas nightclub owner, shoots him.
It was like something you'd see in a Western, not real life.
Ruby claimed he was acting out of grief for Kennedy. Wanted to spare Jackie the pain of a trial.
But a lot of people think there's more to it, that Ruby was part of something bigger.
A conspiracy.
Exactly. But Ruby died in prison in '67. So whatever his motives were, they died with him.
So we've got this incredibly complex case. Eyewitness accounts are unreliable. Memories are hazy. That's where physical evidence comes in. And when it comes to the JFK assassination, you have to start with the Zapruder film.
Yeah, the Zapruder film. A home movie, 8mm, 26 seconds long, silent. This guy, Abraham Zapruder, he just happened to be filming when the motorcade passed by.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. But because of that, we have the most complete visual record of the assassination.
It's kind of chilling to think about it that way.
Yeah, it's not just a parade he captured, it's a murder. And frame 313, the one that shows Kennedy being hit by the fatal shot, it's become one of the most famous and disturbing images of the 20th century.
It's hard to even look at it.
But the Zapruder film isn't the only visual evidence we have. There's also the Mary Mormon photo.
Right. The Polaroid she took.
Yep.
It shows Kennedy just a split second after he was hit. These images, they're central to the whole case. But they also show how, even with photos and film, there's room for interpretation.
Because things aren't always clear-cut.
Exactly.
It seems like with this case, every answer just brings up more questions.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing to me. We have photos, we have film, and there's still so much we just don't know for sure.
It's what makes this whole event, the assassination, so powerful, I think. All this evidence, tons of investigations, and we're still debating it decades later. It's like this case that just won't stay closed.
It's a puzzle with missing pieces. Some of them are damaged. It's like the picture on the box is all blurry. Kind of get the idea, but
you never really know if you've got it all figured out.
Exactly. And all that uncertainty, that's what makes people come up with all those conspiracy theories, right?
Oh, absolutely. You've got this young president, charismatic, full of life, and then, boom, gone. And on top of that, all these unanswered questions, these inconsistencies, it's like something out of a spy movie. Yeah, I can see how people would be looking for something, some explanation, some big plan, someone pulling the strings.
Right. Because just some random guy acting alone, that's almost too hard to believe.
It's almost like we need there to be some bigger reason, something we can make sense of.
Our brains, they want things to make sense. So when something as crazy and senseless as this assassination happens, we try to find a pattern. We try to connect the dots, even if it means making things up.
So besides the Warren Commission, there were all these other investigations, right? Like the Ramsey Clark panel.
Oh yeah, back in '68. They took another look at the autopsy photos and x-rays.
Yeah.
Same conclusion as the Warren Commission. 2 bullets fired from behind.
Okay, so what about the Rockefeller Commission?
That one was in '75. They were looking into the CIA, seeing if maybe they were involved.
So that's where that theory came from.
Exactly. But they didn't find anything to support it. They also looked into that whole thing about Kennedy's head snapping back after the fatal shot.
Oh, right. Because some people thought that meant the shot came from the front, like the grassy knoll.
Yeah, but they said it was actually consistent with a shot from behind. Like the impact would have thrown his head forward first and then back. They called it neuromuscular reaction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then you had the Church Committee, also in the mid-'70s. They were more focused on the intelligence agencies in general.
So like keeping tabs on them, making sure they weren't abusing their power.
Exactly. And while they didn't find a conspiracy in the assassination, they did criticize the FBI and CIA for not being totally upfront with the Warren Commission.
That's not going to help with public trust, is it?
Not at all. And then, of course, you have the big one, The House Select Committee on Assassinations, the HSCA, they did a huge investigation in the late 70s,
Re-interviewing witnesses, all
the
that.
whole nine yards. And in the end, they said Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy.
Really? So they actually said it was a conspiracy.
Well, they based that conclusion on an analysis of this police recording, a dictabelt. They said they could hear a fourth shot coming from the grassy knoll.
Wow.
But then later on, the Justice Department did their own analysis and said those sounds probably weren't gunshots.
So, back to square one.
Pretty much. Even with all that effort, they ended up creating more questions than they answered. And then, of course, you have Oliver Stone's movie JFK in '91.
Oh, yeah, that movie really got people talking again.
It did, and it actually led to the JFK Records Act in '92, which meant they had to release all the documents related to the assassination. The idea was that more transparency would help clear things up.
Makes sense. Did it work?
Well, we've got millions of pages of documents now, but there's still no answer that everyone agrees on. The assassination of JFK, it's still a big historical mystery.
A puzzle that might never be completely solved.
That's a good way to put it. It makes you think, makes you weigh the evidence. It reminds you that sometimes there just aren't easy answers.
Yeah, it shows you that history isn't always clear-cut, It's messy, it's complicated, sometimes the truth gets tangled up, and you can't ever really straighten it out.
We're left with questions, doubts, and this fascination, this need to understand what really happened on that day in Dallas.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into the assassination of JFK. We hope you learned something new, or at least had some of those old questions come up again. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast for more fascinating stories. We'll see you next time.